That number and the black rock symbol have been correlated. In fact, this is a thing we've been talking about for a while now, but even the Black Rock City is where they do the Burning Man, and Burning Man is the Christ, 33 is associated with Christ. These things are all interconnected. It's the dying, resurrecting Savior, represented too by the obelisk, which we were referencing with the rocket, which is an obelisk. That's why the rocket that was going to launch today has 33 engines. It's just a reference to the 33 vertebrae, and the rocket ascending to the sky symbolizes the journey up the Kabbalistic tree of life from the kingdom to the crown, from black to white, Malkuth to Kether. They have this mystic system that's behind or between the lines, behind the green screen, that we don't see. All these people gathered around like, oh, shucks. There was a valve that failed. They couldn't launch the rocket today. No, they're doing it on 420. But while you were there, you were basically worshiping their God. That's all it is. The space program is the heaven program. Space has replaced and supplanted all the previous archaic concepts of heaven. It's the new universal heaven, and nobody's going to go there because it's a hoax. And the priests who say they can take you there, Musk, I am the way, no, it's actually, again, it's the same ruse. Prima Jihad says Elvis Presley has a song called Black Star 2, and he's the only one on Hollywood Boulevard with a black star. Yes, Jurassic Liars made me aware of that, Garrow. You have to check out Jurassic Liars' channel. I can't break it down for you because he's followed a very specific set of narrative threads in the predictive and concurrent programming that are consistently bringing Elvis into the picture in very fascinating ways connected to Trump. Now, Trump has a Hollywood star, but his isn't black like Elvis's, you're right. And Elvis's song, Black Star, is about his impending death. And he died at 42. He said something about you see a black star over your shoulder, your time's come. Well, the track released, the album Black Star, and the track came out on Elvis's birthday, which is David Bowie's birthday. And the album Black Star has a lot of symbolism attached to this Starman character that is also a big character on the world stage. Starman is the savior, the man who fell to earth, who has been portrayed by David Bowie. And David Bowie's not just some rock star entertainer, but his music has run a concurrent path. It's gone on a concurrent trajectory along with the space program, starting with Apollo 11. Space Oddity was playing on BBC during Apollo 11, and Apollo 11 then went forward as we go on our journey to space.
That's a profession, like the whole world is pretending. Found the truth around the penguin. Get a gang on with a blessing. All the other gang is stressing. RPSC on a nesting. Only real one's gonna get this. Fake ones don't accept this. They can miss the message. Timbuktu got bodies, yeah. Find them in our wreckage. Auto hosting messing. Squad to represent. Killing you with knowledge, yeah, the oppa's getting dirty. Oh, you're so effective, cause we're so effective. Let go of your worries, yeah, the whole thing is a setup. We got it and we get it, offering refreshment. Level up your consciousness, honestly the essence. This wave is uncontainable.
Go ahead and share the stream. We have notifications going out and phones are opening up now. This is FAKEABLE, Allergic to Bullshit, featuring Lean Dion.
Coming with a vengeance, trying to make you come to your senses. Forget the general consensus, just pay attention. You walk the head paved with good intentions. I'm clenching, my back wrenching, representing only the most superior, independent media. We got that real shit, fucking encyclopedia. We're bringing an end to this mass hysteria. They wanna know why it's so serious, cause you must be delirious. If you're still believing stuff, get a grip and show some evidence for your own claims. We don't play no games, we stay relentless, exposing those events. With the IPS, I'm making an entrance. Busting doors down, cause now's the time for interventions that I mentioned. We're affecting so many man across the spectrum. We stand out from the crowd, we don't blend in. Steady gaining tremendous momentum. There's nothing close resemblance. Check the emblem, it's a penguin, not a gremlin. Just letting you know you're on an infinite plane, it's never bending. We strike like 10 pin, killing all fears and breaking the tension. Gotta know the hopes on me, digging deep in the trenches. Come and join in, be adventurous. Quit being so sensitive, forget the censorship. We ain't telling fibs. Messing with the penguin. We're messing with the penguin. Messing with the penguin. Messing with the penguin.
Okay, it's Saturn Day, July 29th, 2023. The title of today's live stream is Birds Are Fakeable, which they are. It would be a denial of reality to say that birds aren't fakeable. And earlier today, Pope Elon tweeted how it feels to spread misinformation. He tweeted something else about birds aren't fake. And birds aren't fake sounds like a funny tweet, but it's actually a reference to the birds are fake psyop, which was actually led by the Parkland High School crisis actors. And it was meant to refute the claims of conspiracy theorists calling things fake. So they are diluting the concept of preemptively calling things fake or auto-hoaxing by design. It's a purposeful attempt to sabotage any counter-narrative that has any weight that includes the existence of psychological operations and media fakery. And the fact that the preeminent media faker when it comes to space fakery and mind junk via Twitter, the main psyop reinforcer of the day, specifically for the right, Elon Musk, for him to invoke the birds aren't fake or birds are, I think it's called birds aren't real. But for him to invoke that is not a coincidence. It's not being ironic or funny, because the real question is, are school shootings real? You know, they're like, birds are fake is meant, again, as a discrediting move, and birds are fakeable, meaning, yeah, you can fake them with CGI. You can fake them with animatronics. But are they fakeable at scale? No. Is there a valid claim that they don't exist? Is there any way you could actually state that without insulting the intelligence of the people who've lived around birds? Well, no, not really. You know, extraordinary claims do require extraordinary evidence, but also extraordinary claims that counter the status quo have to be attended by some kind of evidence that goes against the prevailing narrative. I would even attach this to chemtrails. I was on Twitter fighting with chemtrail believers. And, I mean, they're brave. They don't wear masks, I've noticed. For all the toxins that they're aware of, they don't wear masks. But I was arguing with one today, and I'm like, look, what we're fundamentally arguing about here isn't whether or not these things are real. It's about interpretation. And he's accusing me of denying the evidence of his eyes. He's like, are my eyes lying to me? And I'm like, no, your mind is. Just like your eyes will lie to you if you watch boats going, quote, over the horizon. Yeah, your eyes will lie. They are liars. However, the facts about the boats going over the horizon have been revealed by the P900, simply that they really don't. They just converge with the horizon. And the angular resolution of the human eye makes them appear to go over. It's just a problem with our vision. So your eyes will lie to you, and if your mind accepts that optical illusion, your mind lies to you. And that's what I was pointing out. But a lot of people have difficulty admitting that they've been duped. As Mark Twain wrote, it is easier to fool a man than convince him he has been fooled. And many truthers think they have risen above being fooled. So here's a very important question I ask when in the auto-hoaxology coursework. Are you dupable? Are you dupable? If your answer is no, you're duping yourself. You're basically lying to yourself. Your eyes can be tricked. Sleight of hand, optical illusions. But then moreover, your mind can be tricked through loaded questions, logical fallacies, peer pressure. There are a lot of reasons why people come to believe the things that they do, even if they don't have a basis in fact. And what I'm working out here is this framework for interpreting media that includes the very well-established existence of controlled opposition narratives. And I would put chemtrail belief as a standard, staple aspect of the controlled opposition. Because whether you are on the left, the right, or undecided, they want you to accept as a general premise that you are somehow screwing up the planet, and it's going to judge you at some point for what the sinners have done, the polluters have done, the capitalists have done. Okay, let's go ahead and continue here. I want to go through the comments. Let's go. Frank Murr, Oshro6, Ollie Goering says FAKEABLE, which he is, the greatest of all emperor penguins. More on him later. 6079 Smith says Elvis was born January 8th. Yep, also David Bowie's birthday. Leaving 357 days left in the year. Yeah, if you want to call and talk about the numerology, the birth dates, let's definitely get into it. Jay Islet, X322. And by the way, X322's coloring book is available. Go to timosmond.art. I've repurposed the eBay store for the IPS catalog of books and merch. Thirst for Truth, Baja Pickleball, Tyrone McCloskey's here. They cloned Tyrone McCloskey. If you haven't seen They Cloned Tyrone, you got to check it out. I can't say enough good things about it as a movie. And, you know, I say this as a former film studies major, which is probably why I'm so into analyzing the fake news. Once I figured it out, it's all just a movie. It became much more interesting and layered. 777 says, penguins are the realest type of bird. There are people who are full-blown penguin deniers. There are full-blown penguin deniers out there. I've encountered them. Now, they're fakeable, but not at scale. Kimmy Spreadborough, Space Chimps is back here as well. Clockwork 113. All right, excellent. We have a good crowd here already for Infinite Plane SaturnDay. Just wanted to make sure we had a good crowd before we really get rolling. Elephant Tusks asked, what do you think happened with Malaysia Airlines Flight 370? I assume that the pilot fell asleep and they stopped dipping the nose down, and so it just kept going up, up, up into, I don't know, the firmament. I mean, space is fake, but who knows? No, that's actually not true. It is not true that a plane should have to dip its nose to counter the curve of the Earth. That's a misunderstanding of how airplanes actually work. It's an interesting concept, though, as a possible debunk angle for the curvature, which nobody here has seen. Nobody's seen the curvature of the Earth. Someone else said it's not flat, it's a toroidal field, it's electromagnetic. I'm like, you know, you can put your model first if you want, but the fallacy there is assuming certainty, alleging certainty about something you don't have the facts for. A lot of people lined up behind this pancake with a dome on it, and they said, that's my world. God made it, and he made it small. There's nothing else. It's like, how do you know? If you lead with the model, you're putting the cart before the horse, you don't go anywhere, you don't learn anything. And if you're not willing to debunk your own model, you've left science, you've left reason, logic behind. Okay, let's see here. Tyrone says birth dates are assigned to the personas. The actual hatching date for Elvis could be any date. Yeah, same goes for death dates. Sure, they may die on this or that day, but that's likely scripted to fit this broader plan. This is not coincidences. These are not synchronicities. This is a script. And in fact, today, after this live stream, we are going to be, as a group, watching a premiere of The Newsbenders from 1968. And here's a synopsis. Now, the synopsis will contain some spoilers, but that's what we do. We are offering spoilers on the world stage's script itself. Now, this is a very nuanced and detailed breakdown. It's from the 30-minute theater that ran from 1965 to 1973, and it predicted. Here's what it did. This was a play that showed somebody being recruited to work in media, and he finds out that they write the news 5 years in advance, the Newsbenders. And what I'm positing here is they write the news 50 years in advance, easily, and they work down from there. Rubinson says there is no models. Yeah, I'm with you on this. I'm saying it's premature to have a model, and the worldview of the general public, it accepts the globe as a premise, but they don't experience that. We don't live in the model. And I think it's very important to recognize that even though the people who believe the established paradigm will say, hey, you don't have a model for anything other than the ball, you can actually retort that with, well, where's yours? Because their model is incomplete, inconsistent, incoherent, and often they don't even know a lot about it. Ask your nearest globe Earth believer what shape the solar system is. They will blank. Until they're Neuralinked, then they'll have the answers that are appropriate. But until the day that they're Neuralinked, they're going to draw a blank, and you're going to have to inform them that their solar system is flat. And they'll say, well, how come all the other planets are perfectly spherical and the Earth is not? And you can say, well, the Earth, according to your model, apparently you missed this day in science class, your Earth is an oblate spheroid. It's not a perfect sphere. Conservation of angular momentum. But then you could ask, well, why does that not apply to every single other so-called planet? How come Saturn is not an oblate spheroid? I find Saturn to be very unbelievable, by the way. I mean, I know it's there, and I look at it through my binoculars. I just find it unbelievable how thin its rings of ice are that we're observing from millions of miles away. I think it's ludicrous. Clockwork 113 says Mystery Science Theater. Yeah, this is Mystery Babylon Theater 2023. Now, I brought up the whole birds are fake thing because that was a psyop that spun off of a psyop to counter people recognizing a psyop for what it is. And the people behind it, who are part of the Parkland thing, are complicit in the big psyop. Like, they're so deceptive, running out there pretending that they're trying to do some good for the world by countering misinformation when they are cementing the lies while ridiculing the people who can see. That's just entirely evil. That's gaslighting. And the mentality of these individuals, they got to be elitists. I mean, who knows where they're hatched from ultimately? And that's a fair question. We were looking at the political antipodes of Kyle Rittenhouse and Greta Thunberg on Twitter the other day, and how they have the same birthday, January 3rd, 2003. As far as the numbers, I don't know necessarily, but the important key issue here is you have the poster child of the right, the poster child of the left, both of them equally a part of the big picture, and they have the same birth date. So I'm like, yeah, there's something else to it. Robbie says, can you explain the airplane thing, not having to dip the nose? Yeah, it has to do with the amount of, I believe it has to do with, it would need more propulsion to go higher. It just can't climb. At some point, it's going to reach a limit. It's not going to climb indefinitely. And I think it's also because the atmosphere, of course, gets thinner as you go up. But no, they do reach a point where they wouldn't continue to go up. As far as not having to dip the nose, I think we're dealing with something on a scale that any kind of adjustment would just be imperceptible if it was there. It's just not, I don't think it's a factor. I mean, I'd like to go deeper into it, though. There's a pilot who called in quite frequently before. I will reach out to him and see what his thoughts are on the matter. I think it might be a bigger deal if you're talking about something going at a high rate of speed at a lower altitude, perhaps. I mean, it stands to reason. If you're looking at this so-called curvature, and from point A to point B, and each of these points being a mile across, point A to point B, there's a certain amount of curve. Point A to point C, or then point A to point Z, it becomes increasingly precipitous, and it would be more noticeable. Tyrone says, Greta has aggressive male attributes, and Kyle came off as a crying wimp. Fascinating. You know, you're right about that. Absolutely. Was he compensating for something with that AR-15? There's something with that. But one of my points is they're perfectly complementary. I mean, how does that even happen? Elephant Tusk says, have you heard that jet fuel is unnecessary? I've seen some compelling arguments and conspiracy theories that make perfect sense. It makes a lot of sense, in fact. It might even explain purposeful confusion sown about condensation trails. I mean, I'm really curious about this. Although, I should point out, jet fuel is unnecessary for condensation trails. Electric jets can actually produce them as well. Okay, Rubinson says, have we even seen an incomplete model of the globe? The best we have seen is the blue marble, and there's some contradictions in there. Like, for example, if you're watching on the screen, we do have some visuals here. I actually pointed this out the other day. I was going through images of the Earth as seen from space. And to my knowledge, electricity existed prior to 1970. But for some reason, if you look at some of the early pictures of the globe, the night side is always black, pitch black, as in it's night. And yet, when you look at the International Space Station's versions of it, and they're merely a few hundred miles above the surface, the Earth is lit like Christmas. And this is just a major contradiction. And I'll pull it up on the screen so you can compare the two and judge for yourself. Because you're like, well, one of these is night, and the other is also night. How do you explain this? Are you going to tell me that the light from the cities is only visible for 180 miles? And then you have stars in the background. I mean, I don't know. There's got to be some kind of excuses, some ad hoc explanation they can throw at us to explain this. But to the rational free thinker, you're not looking at a photograph. You realize you're looking at cartoons, especially with the bottom. The bottom image, the graphics there are worse than what you see on contemporary video games. And that's a fascinating topic in and of itself. How video game culture has been a gateway for the space program to be made a part of people's lives, where they're just sitting there in front of a screen, staring at simulated space, usually flying through space, shooting asteroids, fighting aliens, landing on spinning balls. Like the whole science fiction paradigm that people mistake for reality is inculcated through a lot of things like video games. I was actually driving around today and I saw a car seat on the side of the road. And I was like, that reminds me of one of those video game seats that I've seen in the stores, where it looks like a car seat. Put it on the floor and you play video games. And I was like, could that be intentional? As in, could that be, for example, just another way to signify or even bring back that feeling of infantilization? You're in the womb of your basement. You're playing the video games. You're in this little enclosed safe space. And I think that's also a part of the programming, getting us ready for lockdown culture, where now instead of running outside and playing in the world and spreading your carbon footprint and possible misinformation, no, they've got you locked down voluntarily with no incentive to go anywhere, and you spend all your time absorbing the false paradigm. Between the space games and Grand Theft Auto, they have everything they need for the revolution. They need people to destroy what is and then prepare to vacate. Joined by Craig Mack says, hello, good people. Let's see here. Elephant Tusk says, lots of men are man-childs these days. Right, sure. But the Gretas make up for it. I'm certain it balances itself out. I do think we're looking at some alchemical processing. Like, if you really want to look at this big picture, I would posit that Greta is just an anagram for great. That the Greta reset is what we're experiencing. That the Great Reset and the Greta Reset are both part of the great work of ages the Masonic cult spoke of, the great work of the Lemite group that runs the world. And I'm just suggesting here that she was the herald of the New Age, that the book prophesied that there would be this, what they called a crowned, conquering child who would chastise the old age, condemn their old ways, and bring about this youth-led world rebellion and installation of a new age. And that this child would be an androgen and the perfect incarnation of the Horus, the god of Mars, but in the Egyptian pantheon, this Horus character is supposedly the perfect blend of the patriarchy and the matriarchy, god and goddess. So when they say androgen, they're referring to the mental and emotional properties more than necessarily physical, I think. But I think that what Greta represented with that speech, "How dare you," was a perfect example of a condemnation of the previous generations. You killed my dreams. You ruined everything before I got here. So yes, and then one more point. If you look back at any images of Greta, what do you see? It's a very common thing. Because we talk about symbolism. Well, one of the more common symbols that we see is actually a reference to this new age of Horus, and it's the one eye being emphasized. So if you look at all the imagery of Greta, I just searched Greta one eye. Here she is with the black goo on her head, one eye covered. Here she is, shadow of a hand over one eye. Here she is, coin over an eye. Here she is, bleeding from an eye, a leaf over an eye. It's a reoccurring theme. I'm not saying she's the Antichrist any more than Musk is the Antichrist, but I think it's sort of like a shared gig that has to have many different faces to convey the big picture, and I believe she was one of those faces. Okay, let's see here. Osher says, Greta has a video of her telling the "how dare you" speech to a friend eating from her plate. She's just a crisis actor. Oh, yes. Do you remember the documentary where she's like on a train? She's got her luggage on the floor. Well, it came out that she was in first class. But at some point, she sat on the floor and had pictures taken. It's all image building. These actors are all fake. And Kyle's just as fake. I would even go so far as to say that Kyle is a rebrand of Chris Kyle, the highly decorated Marine sniper who supposedly went to New Orleans during Katrina and shot 30 looters. Like, you could not get away with that today. But back then, during the Bush era, shooting looters was just like a pat on the back. Okay, so the phones are now open, 505-349-0420. We're talking about, are birds fake? Do you believe in nukes? Do you believe in fake nukes? I should be asking. I put that into a poll. It's kind of maybe it's too loaded, but do you believe in fake nukes? There's a number of damage control pieces out right now because Joe Rogan talked about nukes being faked. Even Owen Benjamin talked about nukes being fake, and it's gone kind of viral. And what's kind of funny is I saw this tweet by Owen Benjamin. Apparently he got some flack from truthers who are mad that he got viral for calling nukes fake ahead of people who have been saying it for years. And it's just an interesting phenomenon of truthers who are really in it for some kind of, I guess, clout. To be the first to have called it, like there's some kind of intrinsic value in that. But, you know, spouting this or that, true or not, to me is irrelevant if the context isn't properly understood. You know, there's a lot of out of context truths out there on Twitter. It means nothing. It's a sea of irrelevance. On the screen is an image. I don't know if you watched it, but there was an interview between Tucker Carlson, and this is in a car. So it's like low budget, kind of street. It's not in a big building like the Fox studio. There's Tucker Carlson and Ice Cube. So Ice Cube has made it very clear that he's not part of the club of gatekeepers. And Tucker Carlson, he got thrown out by the elite media. And now he's a populist on Twitter with a lower budget, and you can trust him, right? So I'm just showing you here, you're supposed to believe these two are not part of the establishment. And a lot of people actually see this and accept it. But I have to point out that Ice Cube is very well aware of the meaning of the symbols that he's wearing. I've seen his tweets on the subject of the symbol of Saturn and logos and the 666 and everything else. I've actually retweeted some of his tweets. So for him to wear the monster logo on his forehead is a clear contradiction In other words, it'd be like any of us, wearing the same thing, knowing what it means. It's a sly nod to the handlers, if you ask me. So if you're not aware of what the Monster Energy drink logo means, Unleash the Beast. You may have heard the slogan. Well, basically, Monster Energy drinks promotes Satan. That's been the take for a long time. I actually have a video on this, but the take on it is based on the idea that the nails, or that the claw marks, are actually nails, like 3 nails, like hanging Christ. But moreover, they're the same as the Hebrew character for nail, and I think it attaches to the number 6. So you have a 666 right here. In a controversial video posted to YouTube, Monster Energy drinks are works of Satan. A woman claims they're using this to promote the Antichrist agenda. So she says that the Hebrew numeral for 6 is the letter Vav, and there's 3 of those. So the M is not an M. It's 3 separate letters, as you can see. And it does, therefore, show you a 666. It's not hard to reach this, especially with the Unleash the Beast, the upside down cross. And so, like, she's been mocked. I believe she's even been taken to task by Snopes, the woman who went viral for expressing this. She said, "This is not a Christian company. Why would they have a cross on the can?" Which is a very interesting point. Why would they have a cross? And again, you're in denial if you say it's not somehow connected to this set of iconography and symbolism. It most decidedly is. And I'm just saying, for Ice Cube to back it, that's kind of strange.
There's a gap right here in the letter M. It's never connected. So you go into Hebrew. The letter Vav is also the number 6. Short top, long tail. Short top, long tail. You could have here in Hebrew 666 on the can.
So there you have it, 666 on the can. She has a point. And again, Ice Cube is very well apprised of all the symbolism out there. I've seen him retweeting these things. So I'm just saying, he's probably another one of these controlled opposition agents. Although, who here doesn't already know this, if they're heavily promoted? Elephant Tusk says, all the world's a stage. Yep, that's a fair statement. It really is. When people ask me about models, I would say this. The model of the world is not like cosmology necessarily, but how people see it, how they react, how they understand it. And the model we've been given is the world stage interpretation. It's everything they use to augment what you experience with your own senses. It's the backdrop, it's the backstory, it's the subtext, it's the guided, scripted, actor-based reality. And of course, driven by the news, which writes our history as they go. The Newsbenders really, I think, is a documentary more than it's just a hypothetical. And I think you might agree. So if you just got here, we are going to be watching Newsbenders immediately after. I have it ready to premiere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post a link in the chat. There's about 6 of you in there. If you click that link, we're all going to be in that chat after watching Newsbenders. Rocco Calzone says Ice Cube, Ice Saturn. Ooh, I never made that connection. That's really good. Ice Cube, Ice Saturn. And something else too. I've been talking about this dynamic between Saturn and the sun, and the idea of falling and ascension. The idea of the kingdom, the earth, black, source, the celestial realm, light. So light and dark, Saturn and sun. This is a constant pairing we see in all of their psyops, and it's an intrinsic part of their religious paradigm, where the sun rules the day, Saturn brings the night. And this is inculcated into all of this symbolism here, where when you're in this realm, you're under the auspices or dominion of Saturn, the realm symbolized by the cube. Like carbon, 666, the various ways they represent it, as we often talk about. But interestingly enough, the body of symbolism attached to Saturn all seems to suggest imprisonment in time, and space. But that liberation from it, or ascending out of matter, is constantly associated with the number 33. Like Christ ascending, or the fire snake representing the ascension of consciousness to the crown. Again, the crown chakra, the root chakra, the top and the bottom correspond to earth and the heavens. So there's this connection here where the number 33 could represent the melting of ice. We're frozen more or less, so to speak, in this material realm, and the heating up represented by the fire snake, the transcendence at 33 represented by Christ transcending the material. Yeah, it could represent state change. Water, frozen, cube, into the liquid as it melts. I think there's a correlation here, but anyway, there's a big body of symbolism here, and so we're looking at Shill cube, as Gematria 101 puts it. Elephant Tusk says, I think they're going to convince everyone that the Earth is uninhabitable via climate change, bring in the alien agenda, and convince everyone they need to board their ships to survive. Well, you can't separate the climate change storyline from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. And the space program has been the program to sell us on what? Arcs. Arcs to Mars. Arcs to the moon. Space arcs. And space arcs are a reoccurring theme in all of the major science fiction productions on Netflix and many movies that we've all seen. And the space arc is the Noah's Ark of the New Age. In fact, Musk even tweeted a picture of a starship with all the animals in pairs going into it. You can also correlate the idea of the Ark with the bunker, the underground bunker. This is all just doomsday cultism. Quarantine. Joined by Spirit Jordak, David Hoaxme, thank you for joining. Phones are open, and if you want to contact me or get in on the live stream, you can also just go to Skype if you're international. So go to twitter.com/realtimosman, and as you'll see, at the very top, you have the phone number, and there's a direct link. So again, you can get on the Twitter and just follow me there. You may leave voicemails for on-air play. In fact, let me go through my tweets and see if there's anything pressing right now. One of the main topics of late, though, has been the fake nukes. That has definitely gone viral, and they've definitely gone into damage control. We've been talking about the symbolism of X and Pope Elon quite a lot. In fact, I try not to spend a lot of time hyper-focused on him, because this is the form of idol worship that they prefer that you all engage in. They want you reacting, overreacting to all of these various personas. Again, Tucker Carlson had an interview with Ice Cube. Trust us, we're not from the elite club of gatekeepers. Right. CIA, possible. I mean, again, we're talking about fake populism. And this is one of the main things that I think plagues the entire, quote, truth community, is that even though they've broken free from the mainstream paradigm, they nonetheless find themselves dependent on trusted voices. So they're always on the lookout for outsiders, or people who can convincingly play the outsider. Coming to the USA soon, Chinese with low social credit scores are barred from high-end hotels, tourist attractions, spas, and nightclubs. This is coming. One of the reasons I think they've put rate limits on tweets is acclimating you to this new form of life where everything you do is metered. Every breath you take, every step you take. It's like, okay, you're allotted 3 miles of walking outside per week, because, of course, we're trying to mitigate your carbon footprint. And once they can itemize it, once they can find a way to tax it, they essentially will. And none of this surprises me at all. This is definitely the way that things are going. And when it's far off, nobody sees it as a problem. Nobody sees it as a problem that you get rate metered on Twitter at 6,000 tweets. Well, the problem with it is twofold. One, you can't even look at tweets if you're not a member. You can't even access Twitter. So what they've done is they have limited the audience just right off the start. They've limited scraping and they've closed it. So essentially Twitter's quarantine, but you may not notice because it's huge right now. Then second, the rate metering doesn't seem like a big deal now, but they established the premise. And the whole point of it is this. They are taking the infinite plane of ideas, the infinite plane of tweets, and then artificially putting constraints. And once you've accepted these constraints, they can work on, well, this is borderline, got to remove this. That's too edgy, remove that. That's fringe, remove it. And they're shrinking the universe of ideas. But more importantly, and this ties in with Pope Elon's historic role, he's reprising Constantine, they're in the process of consolidating everything. That's why he's saying that X means to him everything. Just as Constantine unified an empire under the sign of the cross, my contention here is that the X is simply another cross. And they're doing the same exact thing. Whereas previously Constantine was associated with serfdom and fiefdoms, well, the new fiefdoms are your Mars bases. Your dome-enclosed space habitats, most likely subterranean. Most likely under China, but who's going to know? Joined by Josh for Chairs. Thanks for joining. Again, if anybody wants to call in or Skype in, lines are open. And I have conquered the Skype ringer, which has plagued live streamers for years. I'm about to put a tutorial out on it. Tyrone asks, are there any poor illiterates already underground in Arizona in the Mars bases, like a beta test going on, using undocumented people, Indian, Chinese? Fascinating. You know, I was thinking, this Operation Underground Railroad, Tim Ballard, this whole time, it's likely been controlled opposition to real human trafficking. And do you remember what that, they say ex-CIA, David Knight said on InfoWars? He said that children were being taken to Mars to be slaves. He said that children were being sent to Mars to be slaves, and they were on like a 27-year trip or something. But anyway, it sounds crazy, but NASA actually had their PR person come out and do some damage control. They said, no, we're not sending kids to Mars. But I'm thinking, what if he heard something? As in, maybe he heard rumors while he was in that were credible, and obviously Mars is fake, but does that mean they weren't transporting them somewhere with the code name Mars? That's kind of what I'm suggesting. Are there slaves on Mars already? I think it's a fair question. Here's from space.com. New conspiracy theory. Children kidnapped for Mars slave colony. Salon. NASA denies InfoWars' claim that the agency runs a child slave colony on Mars. Now, we know for a fact they have the technology to simulate space travel. You've ever been to Disneyland? We know for a fact that Disney, Walt Disney, and Von Braun were BFFs. And it doesn't take a lot to put this together. Then you have Musk with his tunnels, his boring company, his Willy Wonka persona. There's clearly this idea that they want to sell people on going on this wild trip to this distant place. And the idea here, I'm thinking, is they probably are packing underground bases with slave colonies who think they're on Mars. It was something else they said, too. They said, and the scientists say, that it would take a couple generations to terraform Mars, because before you can go on the surface, you have to make Mars Earth. Well, how do you make Mars Earth? Well, you have to do, and there are many ways they've suggested. They've suggested nuking the poles, loosing bovine. I think Dr. Michio Makaku suggested that. So many different ways to make Mars Earth. But the point of it is, nobody's leaving the underground bases for a couple generations. So I was thinking, they could pack these underground bases, and they could be down there now. The Martians are beneath their feet. And maybe after we're dealt with, the Martians come to the surface. That's one possibility. Maybe they stay down there. You got to see the movie Orbiter 9. Now, there are these science fiction books I'd picked up at a thrift shop. I think one of them was called Green Mars, and the other one was Red Mars, something like that. But it was about the schism where humans had settled on Mars, but half of the group there decided, we don't want to make this Earth. We don't want to ruin this planet too. So you had this environmentalist faction rise up, and they said, we're going back to nature. So it was this rejection of modernity, the rejection of bringing capitalism and Western values to Mars. And this is important because, as I talked about earlier, the Great Reset, the Greta Reset, this transition into the green world order, it's just a code for world communism, as is the space communes. This is just another way of saying that the new age has to be sustainable. We have to live in a sustainable way, and that means doing away with the things that are destroying the Earth. So if you weren't aware, the real agenda behind the space program is to be a stalking horse for communism. That's the end game. And most conservatives, most right-wingers understand that this is absolutely the case with environmentalism. They say, oh, Greta, here with the watermelon Marxism. Green on the outside, red on the inside. Well, the Mars program is 100% red. Always has been. And if you can accept the notion that environmentalism would be used as a stalking horse for Marxism, why would it be difficult to accept that space utopianism isn't just an extension of the same program? Space communism. There is no space capitalism. There is no freedom in space. Although, weirdly, Jeff Bezos had once remarked that the Earth would have to go into stasis because it cannot survive what we're doing to the environment, that we will not have freedom on Earth. He said we'd be a civilization of stasis, but that if you wanted freedom, you would have to go to space. This is Jeff Bezos, Blue Origin founder, talking about the inspiration of NASA's Apollo missions, civilization of stasis or spacefarers. There's your choice. He even remarked on having accepted that we're going to need some more authoritarian governmental structures to take away our freedoms here, again, so we can be free up in space.
Minus 10, 9.
Ever since I was 5 years old, that's when Neil Armstrong stepped onto the surface of the moon. I've been passionate about space, rockets, rocket engines, space travel. I think we all have passions.
Now, this is just obviously Bezos talking about this, but here's the point I want to get to, where he says we have to make this choice. Do you want to be free or do you want to be imprisoned on Earth?
We have to decide whether we want a civilization of stasis. We will have to cap population. We will have to cap energy usage.
We will have to cap population. We will have to cap energy use. And this is 4 years ago.
Per capita, or we can fix that problem by moving out into space.
All right, so either we have to cap the human population or we have to start shipping the excess populations to space. Elephant Tusk says more phallic worship. Yeah, of course. I mean, this is all part of the same cult. Blue Origin, the obelisk redesigned as a rocket, the obvious capstone in its capsule. There's a lot of symbolism we could attach to this thing. The New Shepherd, all the sun god references. But one of the things that stands out to me about SpaceX and Jeff Bezos' thing is how they're using the same fakery technology as NASA. Because you have some people who say, okay, NASA's fake, but the private space agencies, yeah, they're not part of that. Absolutely they are. And I'd have to say too, for being the richest man on Earth, Bezos has the cheapest special effects. I mean, these are just the worst. How is this even convincing? Continuing through your comments, Tyrone McCloskey says, just like Ireland in the 1840s, the British emptied Ireland to send slaves to the colonies. Yeah, this is what I think this makes perfect sense. that the space program is ultimately about bottlenecking and directing all human migration. And the people who are going to the colonies, the people who go into the rockets, who are properly, vaxxed and brainwashed, they are a special type of person. The ones who are actually buying this stuff, drinking the Kool-Aid and ready to go to Mars, yeah, they're so brainwashed that they will be slaves by default. I mean, we're looking at a major disparity of awareness between the ones behind the scenes and the ones who believe it. We're looking at a new priesthood and brainwashed sheeple. When I say Pope Elon, I don't say that facetiously. I mean, how else can you describe this thing? And if you look at the basis for his character in von Braun's book, Mars, A Technical Tale, that Elon is a dictator on Mars, the first colony on Mars, and it has a Roman governmental structure. It's structured like the papacy. Now, again, one more point here. The age of Horus, or the New Age, the Great Reset's age thing, this new stage set, it's based on this god of Mars. And that's why you have Elon Musk associated with the Mars program, because they're not taking us to Mars, but they're converting us into the New Age. And of course, the New Age is the age of this Martian androgen amalgamation of the goddess and the god. It's just this new paradigm. But ultimately, the age of Mars is an age of a ubiquitous belief system, which I just call it scientism, transhumanism. The space program is a salvation program. It's a new heaven that's universal, that all religions will believe in. You can be a Hindu, Christian, Muslim, Jew, atheist. You all believe in outer space. Okay, let's go ahead and continue here. Again, trying to talk about the birds are fake thing. Birds are fake, again, is a CIA psyop, actually it's, again, run by the Parkland students, and it's just to discredit people calling things fake. But there are legitimate claims and illegitimate claims in terms of calling something fake. And you have a rational and non-rational basis for calling things fake. For example, the people who say that gorillas are fake. Okay, well, that's not a rational claim. And I would even posit that their allegation of certainty is a fallacy in itself, that they can't possibly believe it. I mean, like, if somebody says something, if they say they believe it, do we have to take them at their word that they actually do believe it? At what point can you call somebody a liar? Like, it's like rude or it's beyond the pale to question someone's beliefs, but I think it's fair game. Like, if I say I believe in unicorns, you could actually say, no, you don't. What am I going to do, cry? Say my rights have been violated because you don't believe me that I believe it. There are some things that you can't believe it. The mental hardware of a semi-rational mind will automatically reject certain things. So I'm just suggesting here that there are some things that people say they believe that they certainly can't. They're just being contrarian. They're BSing. Okay, again, in 30 minutes, we're going to be watching Newsbenders. I put a link below. And if you're in the chat there, just say hello. I'll hand out wrenches. Newsbenders is an important concept because I think we're dealing with reality benders, newsbenders, but it's exactly as described in this movie. Here's an interesting bit of symbolism. This was found by Synchromorpheus. This is a Project Gemini badge. Project Gemini 11, which looks like two towers. This is from 68 or something, JFK Space Center. But if you look at the Gemini logo, it looks like twin towers, and it has a star at each of the impact points. Fascinating connections when you get into the role of Stanley Kubrick in both the JFK assassination and 9/11, and the significance between all of these major psyops in establishing our consensus world view. My contention with NASA is that they don't just fake space. They're about worldview control. getting you to believe the world is a certain way. So they control your inner space. It's mind control. And it's beyond just getting you to think a certain way about what's way up there. It's also about what you think about down here. I would say that the thing we call NASA is just one faction or one aspect to what I call the PSYOP entertainment complex. Because the way that they enforce this ideology is not through forced memorization or any kind of hardcore, what we consider to be brainwashing and indoctrination. It's more like they entertain you into believing it. The indoctrination is entertaining. It's fun. It's designed to be a part of your everyday life. And so they fuse everything. They fuse entertainment with education and with news. It's very uniform. In fact, it's monolithic. And I think Kubrick's symbol of the monolith from Space Odyssey 2001 is one of the primary symbols of this cult to understanding what it's really about. It's not a coincidence that at Ground Zero, you have a Millennium Hilton hotel that looks like a black monolith overlooking the site of the towers. That witness there, that monolith, is actually even named after the Kubrick film. It's actually a nod to Space Odyssey. And then what's more, we're talking about at Ground Zero, this big, monolithic building overlooking the site. The logo of the Hilton itself is very suspect if you haven't looked at it. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. So if you look at the Hilton logo, it's quite obviously Twin Towers, and it shows, like the Gemini patch, a swirl, which would be the flight path of the plane where it hits the towers. That's already part of the Hilton thing. And I'm just pointing this out because the Newsbenders talks about how the news is bent 5 years in advance, and I'm saying it's more like 50 years, that the towers were built to be taken down 33 years later. Not a coincidence, 1968, they start building the towers. 33 years later, they go down. 1968, 911 becomes the emergency line here in America. So 911 was being dialed for emergencies for 33 years when that thing went down. It's all programming. And emergencies in particular are a key concept. That's why the 311 was correlated with the COVID thing. 311 is an emergency number in some places. And what we're looking at is the emergence of the new age through contrived chaos. They create the chaos, establish the order. Through these emergencies, they emerge. It's really just a way of programming us to be responsive as a uniform whole. Like the next thing is the aliens. And I've been talking about the alien correlation with nukes and how it's always been sort of a running theme that they're going to show up when we're about to blow everything up. Well, here's a quote from Aleister Crowley, who supposedly channeled a spirit called Lamb, which looks like a precursor to the classic Roswell-style alien. And he said, today they call them angels and demons. Tomorrow they will call them something else. This is fascinating. Again, I've been noting how the alien arrival will be a very divisive political issue, where the left will side with the aliens as saviors, and the right will see them as demons. That they will automatically contextualize them, because to the left, science is salvation, and yet the right still adheres to more traditional religions. Well, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is typical of the right, she questioned if aliens are in fact demons or angels. Honestly, I've looked into it, she said. This is the House Oversight Committee, moving on from its attacks on Hunter Biden to address UFOs. And this is why so many people think the UFOs are a distraction from nude pictures of Hunter Biden. Were it not for the UFO hearings, you would all be looking at the 4,000 or so photos of Hunter Biden being gross. Now here's what she says. She rejects the idea that the aliens are from space. Quote, I'm a Christian and I believe the Bible. I think that, to me, honestly, and I've looked into it, I think we have to question if it's more spiritual, angels or fallen angels. So fallen angels. Cubstar says MTG has looked into it. Oh yeah, she's looked into it. She's got sources. Honestly, I've looked into it. But that is reflective of an actual trend, a bigger trend, and what is actually a pattern. I think this is something that is more of a political issue than anything. The left-right divide over how aliens will be interpreted by the two parties. Again, it's because one chooses the traditional salvation and one sees the salvation in the future. This is why you have the MAGA, looking to America needs to be made great again, referring to some idealized past, whereas the future, the Great Reset, is after we destroy the traditional values. It's what comes next. Scientism's saviors. So I watched Asteroid City. I talked about this before. And there was a scene where they prayed the Lord's Prayer after the alien had arrived. But they actually prayed it. I think this is tantamount to blasphemy. I'm going to play this clip where they're praying the Lord's Prayer, but it's not to the Lord. It's to the aliens.
Dear alien who art in heaven, lean and skinny, about 6'7".
Now it's terrible. I can't play the rest of it, but dear alien who art in heaven. Now, this is fascinating if you watch the movie, because when the alien descends, they're all wearing cubes on their heads, and the alien has a six-sided star shaped to its craft, which correlates with the symbol of the cube and the whole L, another name for Saturn. This is just infused with the same body of symbolism. But when the alien showed up in the movie, everybody in the audience started cheering. Like they were laughing, cheering, happy, like children watching Santa coming out of a chimney. Well, the New World religion of scientism includes all the parts and pieces of the religions that it has supplanted, including sin, which is now carbon, the virus, which is evil, misinformation is blasphemy, COVID-19 is a devil the atheists can believe in, and the globe is the wrathful God construct they tried to supplicate with taxes, money, sacrifices, recycling. And many adherents of scientism believe in aliens, and they would have thought that ancient people would have misinterpreted them as angels. The high tech would be seen as superstitious or supernatural, and that would be the Marjorie Taylor Greene types. Scientism primarily appeals to the left. Traditional religion falls to the right. This is why the left is prepared to accept aliens, whom they will see as future humans, perfected humans, evolved beyond race, beyond gender, and they've transcended the world itself into the heavens. And of course, heaven is the way that this new paradigm has, heaven is like paradise in all the religions, but the new religion has its heaven. They just call it space, but it's kind of the same thing, especially if you look at the way they glorify it and how when man becomes multiplanetary, he overcomes all of his local issues and possibly even does ascend beyond the ape that was meant for him to evolve to this point, and he becomes more like the alien. So you can see this notion, this dynamic between our animal roots and our possible angelic-like future, and we have to overcome our lower nature. This is religion. This is overcoming sin, overcoming the flesh, overcoming the weakness of the flesh, repackaged for the new age. Being born again, transhumanism, salvation from the modern evil, the vaccine, that's your injectable communion. The priests of scientism offering technology as savior, trusting the science, is putting your faith in, this is their new higher power. So you have your choice now between your man or God as a savior. So the people from traditional religions will definitely see aliens as emissaries of the devil. They will see aliens and their technology as probably evil tricks, and this is obviously for them part of a satanic end times deception. Scientism, of course, is the dominant world religion, and they will probably force the issue. They'll have to have some. I think there's a few movies that have actually touched on this, like Alien Nation. How do you get humanity to integrate with an alien species? Elephant Tusk says, have you ever examined the symbology on sports balls? The patterns on soccer, golf, and basketballs is quite telling. I'd like to look more into that, to be honest. There's quite a lot there, I'm sure. I mean, we see a lot of it, but I always looked at the balls as ball worship. Ball being another name for the earth god. And you have all the elements of worship in a stadium. The ball game. It seems to me that the countdowns even on the shot clock might even be some kind of hypnotic induction. Okay, today is 7/29/2023. This is Infinite Plane SaturnDay. And here in a little while, in about 20 minutes, we're all going to watch The News Benders. The News Benders is a documentary about how the news actually works. So I'm putting a link in the chat one more time. So if you want to join us there, subscribe to that channel. That's the official Infinite Plane Society YouTube channel. Has 0 strikes. We began today mostly talking about the birds are fake PSYOP, which is an extension of the Parkland PSYOP, and how it's meant to discredit people who call things fake that are fake. It's to take the word fake out of any kind of cohesive context. But we have a cure for that. Auto-Hoaxology 101. This is a textbook that's made for the IPS Institute for Advanced Media Deconstruction. It's about 8 months in the making. All this content, all these discussions, all these reasoned arguments and media breakdowns are coming from a framework. And this framework, which is a way to approach media, is being consolidated into a textbook that's going to be published on Monday. And once that's out, we'll move on to the tabloid. And here are just a few of the topics: the misinformed versus the uninformed versus the informed. What's the point of paying attention to the intricacies of the Psy-War? The purpose of predictive programming, or how free minds are contained by false narratives and conspiracy rabbit trails. I actually ran this book of mine, this manuscript, through the Claude AI chatbot, and it gave me a draft, gave me an example of the things I'm covering, and you'll find that this book is going to address many of the things they're using to counter what we are positing. Like, I will bring up this notion of calling things fake as a way of discrediting legitimate claims. This is all, again, going to be released on Monday, and I'll be making it available through the IPS store. Also on the main website, I've opened up a new section, Mind Maps. So if you want to get any of the ones that we've worked on in the past, the ones we're working on now, I am posting them there daily, putting some explanations. Right now I'm developing the Black Christ archetype mind map, and you'll see how pervasive this has been and how it's definitely connected, even up to this Jamie Foxx They Cloned Tyrone movie. The cloning of Tyrone is actually a reference to a resurrection of Hiram of Tyre, and it's a reference to the Tyre Nichols martyrdom, and it connects intricately to the entire BLM narrative, as does Jamie Foxx himself, and he has for some time. We also do mind map breakdowns of other symbols and numbers. 55 or years, 1973, the number 846, among other things. In fact, I've recently developed one that has to do with what I call the off-world stage perspective. And it just takes your basic assumptions about media and then moves from there. So you have the media. What is your basic? What's your disposition? Do you believe what you see on the screen at face value until it's proven fake? Do you have additional information to fill in what you think they're not telling you, or are you approaching it as a hardline skeptic? And I'll be going through this and more in the upcoming Auto Hoaxology 101 textbook. And all of these mind maps, again, are available free. Just go to the website, go to ips.monster or infiniteplainsociety.com. And it's under development, as many things are here. We're constantly upgrading. Last night we talked about this. The NASA, for the first time ever, lost contact with the ISS. It was the first time it ever happened. And it was Expedition 69, which I think correlates it perfectly with the sunken Titan submersible. Hey, what's up, caller?
Hey, yeah, I just saw you got your phones working again. Thought I'd call in.
Excellent. Yeah, phones are back on, and we are pretty much nightly now doing open phones. And pretty soon, within the next week, we'll have the 24/7 chat back on.
Yeah, that's amazing. Enjoying the show today.
Great. Well, I appreciate you calling, and we're going to have a lot more callers in the future, especially as I'm going to make these more topic-oriented in the evenings, and I'll put the talking points out there. And I'm also opening up to somewhat debating a lot of topics that people are still challenged by.
Yeah, I mean, what are you thinking about the whole UFO thing with being in Congress and the government saying that this has happened? I find it to just be ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. But the fact is, they have been preparing us with predictive programming for several generations. We almost have 100 years of alien invasion predictive programming, and it never comes. So I'm wondering, is this just the new religion's version of the rapture that never happens? Like they got the rapture with angels. The scientism religion needs a rapture with aliens. Doesn't matter if it never happens, as long as the believers are always ready for it.
Yeah, for sure. You know what's interesting is that Elon Musk, I saw a tweeter at an interview, I'm not really sure, recently, where he's like, there's absolutely no proof of UFOs. He doesn't believe in it at all. And I find that really interesting because he's such a world stager that why is he saying things like that?
Right. That's a very good
just another thing to get people arguing about or taking sides on.
Right, exactly. I think he's hinted that there might be something else, and I think this has always been hinted at, like the AI perhaps is a scenario that some people find plausible, some kind of, intelligence, like Skynet, things becoming sentient. But as far as the B-movie aliens with big heads running around, that's just so unbelievable. I don't see how they could ever pull something like that off. So if they're going to do an alien invasion, it's going to be some kind of boring, covert thing. Like, I don't think we'll get any show out of it. What do you think?
The only thing that I can fathom is that, I mean, look at how easy they pulled off the whole COVID thing. It's like they could easily just say, yeah, these aliens are here, create a movie set and show them and however they want them to look, and just say they're here to warn us about something, like we're looking the earth or whatever, and they should put it on TV, and 80% of the people are going to believe it. So I could see something like that.
Yeah, something else to consider too is that we are at peak media savvy. We know what they can do, but there are billions of people who don't, and there are a lot of people who are just woefully uninformed or maybe even blissfully disconnected from the mass media, and they're all going to believe it. And all the elite care about are the sheer numbers of believers. They don't care about the intelligentsia. They don't care about the free thinkers. And so it doesn't matter if we see through it from day one, if the multitudes believe it. And you're right, we experienced this with 2020. We were shown some videos in Wuhan, we shut down. So they're going to show us some bad science fiction, tell us it's real. Yeah, we're going to shut down.
Oh yeah, for sure. But to what means, why do you think they would pull something like that off, just to sort of shut down, just make more lockdown in general? Like, I mean, I think that the angle they would take is like, we're destroying the earth with pollution, blah, 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 cars, global warming.
Yes, like the day the earth stood still.
Impulse more.
It's always been this, where
What's that?
like the day the earth stood still, the movie, the scenario has always been
Yeah.
that the aliens are like a more evolved version of us, and that they're not going to intervene in human politics, but if we go too far, they will.
Yeah,
And I kind of thought, well,
yeah,
maybe,
totally. They're always portrayed as this high spirituality.
and they unite us like as one. The whole human race will then suddenly unite.
Yeah.
That would be the agenda behind it. But
Yeah.
now there's one possibility that I've considered too, though, that maybe they will stress America to the breaking point with psyops so that the helter-skelter race war stuff, like they did with 2020, that it gets so out of hand that they're forced to use, a third-party intervention to settle the score or to get everybody to calm down. And if that's the case, that would kind of facilitate this predictive programming that there's going to be some alien invasion that shuts everything down and then makes everybody one. So maybe the alien invasion could be kind of a third party. It doesn't have to be from out there, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see, because it's coming up soon.
Yeah. Yeah, or not. I can also see it just being another, just whatever, I don't know the word for it, but they get it in everyone's consciousness and then they just sort of move on. A year from now, no one's talking about it anymore. And you know what I mean? And there's just
Yeah,
actually just adding to the helter-skelter aspect of everything.
Well, I've been pointing out recently how the Q cult is based on the Seventh-day Adventists. And their whole thing was they predicted that Jesus and a bunch of angels would come down and it would be glorious and the world would wake up. And this was in the 1800s and it didn't happen. But they called it the Great Disappointment, and they just held on to their faith, and they're still around. So I think there might be some kind of programming element to it where they're always dangling the carrot and you never actually get it, because if you get it, you stop looking. So it may be that it's always going to be out of reach. There's always going to be hopium for this event that never is going to come.
Yeah, I think so too. Q, space, COVID, all of it, man. You can't prove any of this stuff. It's sort of unattainable knowledge. You can never prove the vaccine. It's all just sort of floating in space, and you can never prove it,
It's nothing
I think
burgers.
they love that energy.
It's nothing burgers for
Nothing
everybody.
burger, always.
But the thing is,
always.
we may be getting the nothing burgers, but they are definitely getting our focused attention, our money, our loosh, whatever you want to call it. So it's almost like they're definitely harvesting, but we just don't get any of the harvest. It's got to be a bait and switch. I'm not really hopeful of anything, but they are inundating us with it, and it's in the movies, and it's just like it's rare that they predict something that doesn't come true. But the alien thing is kind of special because it's just been around for so long. I don't want to assume it's not going to go down, but I don't know. It just seems like time's running out. I mean,
Yeah, I get that feeling a little bit too.
Like when 9/11 happened, they had everybody's attention. Today, everybody is staring at their phones. They might even be at a movie theater or watching TV at home, and everybody's just fractured. And I don't see how they could possibly get everybody to pay attention without some kind of Project Bluebeam-like spectacle. And so I'm wondering, like, what kind of spectacle can they pull off while they still kind of have our centralized attention? So who knows? We'll see. Possible.
Yeah, absolutely, man, because they're doing these congressional hearings about UFOs, and they got these guys up there saying that they have actually found their bodies, in the wreckage, and no one cares. I mean, so you're right. Like, the attention span's getting crazy short.
Yeah, can you imagine how huge that would have been like 15 or 20 years ago when X-Files was still popular?
Yeah, dude. Yeah, absolutely, man. And now it's just like, whatever.
Yep. Well, hey,
Yeah.
are you going to stick around for Newsbenders, which is coming up in about 5 minutes?
Yeah, I've seen it a few times. I'll probably check it out again. But yeah, thanks for taking my call, and I'll make sure and call back soon.
Cool. Good to talk to you. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
All right. Appreciate the call. Again, this is Infinite Plane SaturnDay for 7/29/2023. We're going to go on over to Newsbenders immediately after this. A commenter's asking how to get a hold of me if I get blacklisted on YouTube again. Yeah, go to infiniteplainsociety.com or ips.monster for short, and it'll be impossible to miss us. And we're on many platforms. In fact, we're on Kick right now. I think we're on Rofkin. We're definitely going to be increasing and amplifying the signal and spreading out to more platforms in the coming days and weeks. But coming up next, we're going to watch a premiere of Newsbenders. So thanks for joining, and I'm going to go ahead and terminate this stream. We're going to begin the 24/7 here very, very soon. This is One-Eyed Jack and the Sharks.